Oh, you will let me know. Okay. Oh, we are. Honey, bonsoir. Good evening and welcome to council's regular meeting. As it's the first meeting of every month, we usually turn it over to the deputy mayor for her to chair. So off to you.
Thank you, Mayor Pajot. So I'd like to start the meeting tonight with the Indigenous land acknowledgement. I'd like to begin the meeting by acknowledging that we are in the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe peoples in the Robinson-Huron Treaty area and wish to recognize the neighboring community of Doki's First Nation. While we meet today, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands which we call home. We do this to reaffirm our relationships and commitment in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, the First Nation peoples that call this land home. So I need a mover and a seconder for the adoption of the agenda. Moved by Dave, seconded by Dean. All in favor? Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Okay, seeing none. We have delegations, 5.1. We have the visioning plan interim report presentation. Are you by Clark Park Consulting? And I forget your name, so you're gonna have to remind us.
Yeah, my name is Steve Lichty.
Okay.
And thank you for the invitation to be here to present this evening. As I think most of you know, we made a similar presentation this morning to the participants from the visioning exercises that were conducted last April. So you're going to see the same thing that they saw this morning with the added benefit of getting some of the wisdom that they imparted, because they had some very good suggestions, which we think should be adopted into the material that we're presenting. I think you're familiar with the methodology of the project that we're working on, as well as the strategic planning project. The two are going in parallel, but there'll be two different sets of deliverables. The one will be the strategic plan that we'll be working on with council and senior staff tomorrow. And the other is economic master plan for 6 economic sectors. You're familiar with the steps that we've taken. I want to point out several in particular. The online survey had 330 respondents, which is quite high, especially for a municipality of this size. And it's quite commendable that people took the time to answer the survey. And they didn't just check all the multiple choice questions, that a lot of the opportunities to fill in a comment under the other section, they took advantage of. And we tried to capture those in the interim report that you have. And the other thing we'd like to commend are the residents who took part in the visioning exercises with the 6 economic sectors, that they had some very valuable information, very useful information. They gave of their time, they gave up their expertise, and it's very much appreciated, and it's been very useful. We're in the home stretch now. We're down to the last couple of points that are left. You're hearing the presentation tonight of our draft findings and recommendations for the economic master plans. Based on the information or the response that we get, we will be making changes within the next 10 days to 2 weeks, coming back with a final draft. One of the questions in the survey was, what are the greatest strengths of French River? You'll see 2 at the top, the natural beauty and the sense of community. And the reason there's such a gap between those 2 and number 3 is that in the actual number of people who selected those choices, there was a huge gap. The actual number in the report, but the natural beauty and the sense of community were by far the overwhelming choices as the best strengths for this community, which speaks well for the community and also should have a major impact on what you plan for your economic development. You should be focusing on those 2 strengths. I should also point out that if you go down to 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, a lot of them are quite similar. Like the community safety, the friendliness, the cleanliness, the history, that's also part of the sense of community. And there's lakes and rivers and that type of thing, which some people will say is part of the natural beauty. Another will say, no, they're for fishing. They're not, but I think they fit under both categories. We're suggesting that there are 4 linkages that tie everything together. You know, your economic development is going to be intricately linked to what your strengths are. Your natural resources, your rivers, your history, your lakes, wildlife. These assets would provide the foundation for tourism. That's why people want to come here. That's why they want to visit here. That's why they want to live here. I think there's been a lot of research done over the last several decades about the impact of quality of life on economic development. And in general, you have a high quality of life here. There are things people would like to see to make it better, but you're in a very good position. You're well positioned. And then it goes around. The excellent quality of life promotes more economic development. These were the 6 economic sectors that we were asked to focus on. We didn't find any conflicting input from any of the 6 sectors. Everything seems to tie together. You'll recall this slide because you saw it in July. This is a quotation from Dr. Roger Martin, who was the director of the Prosperity Institute at the University of Toronto. One of his major clients was the province of Ontario for many years, but he had a lot of significant clients. He also, prior to that, he was the dean of the Rotman School of Business at the University of Toronto. And so the quotation that we give to all of our clients is that making strategy choices is never easy because it means doing some things at the expense of others. If strategic planning was just making a long list of all the things that people suggest, it would be easy. But as the council, as the decision makers, you have to decide which ones are the most important. And so that's particularly important with what we're going to talk about this evening, because we're going to give you a list of things that we think should be a high priority. And sometimes there's an inclination to be polite. And if there's something you think we missed, you'll let us know. But if there's something that's on there that you don't think should be as high a priority, it's even more important that you let us know about that. Because if there's something on there that is not as high a priority, and it should be taken off so that staff don't spend time and resources working on a lower priority item. They have enough work to do with the high priority items. Well, one thing I forgot to mention, the online survey and the focus groups and the interviews we did, practically everything was consistent. There was one area that was not consistent, and it's not unusual. In the focus groups, we're typically asked for the municipality to provide more services. In the survey, it's typically people don't want taxes to go up. So that's another choice you have to make. How do you balance those two? Do you find ways to get more revenue? Do you reallocate resources? How do you do it? For each of the 6 sectors, we've broken it into 2 parts. We've got what we call guiding principles. And these are the things that should drive the decision-making. When you're trying to interpret different things, these are the guiding principles that tell you what you should be looking at. So if you look at the commercial retail sector, some of us like to go shopping. All of us need to go shopping. When we go shopping, we like to buy the things that we need and some of the things that we want. And typically we want more stores. So the more shopping choices there are, the happier we are, the higher our quality of life. The stores don't just contribute to the jobs for the people who work there. There's the contractors who repair them or build additions. There's the people who plow the snow and look after the parking lots. There's the truckers who bring the goods in. There's all kinds of things there are all kinds of indirect jobs that go along with the retail sector. I want to point out the bottom 2 in particular. You're going to see in a minute that your industrial sector, probably the greatest opportunity you have is with the micro industries. It might be a specialty cheese factory. It might be a maple syrup farm. It might be an artisan that makes different things. The commercial sector can also be a venue to market those. And it can also be then a destination for tourists who are looking to buy something interesting, something they can't buy anywhere else. So it does all tie together. So the 4 strategies that we have, the first one we recommend is implement a shop local campaign. Now, one of the participants this morning said, well, some of these things are already happening, so why are they in the plan? There's several reasons for that. We based our recommendations on what we found was the need. And if it's already happening, that means that you're doing the right things because it's consistent with what the data is telling us. The other thing is sometimes there'll be something here that you're working on that you drop for whatever reason. I know a number of municipalities in which I have lived. The province has been telling us they're going to expand a highway from 2 lanes to 4. And I believed it 20 years ago, the first time they said it, but you wonder why it's taken so long. So this is sort of to remind you that these are things that are important. And, I think that your residents, as well as the data, says you need to carry through with them. And the third reason is sometimes you may hear something that's happening, but it's not supported. And there'll be an example coming a little bit later on that. Second thing you have here is council and staff can't do everything. You have to work with community partners. One of the recurring themes from the stakeholder input was the want longer store hours. That's not really something which can be mandated. Well, I guess it could, but we wouldn't recommend it. But we recommend that you work with your Chamber of Commerce, because there's all kinds of other opportunities to work with the chamber to make this a better place. And that's the type of thing which they can probably take a lead role rather than the municipality itself. We see things change all the time. We're going through a process where many more of our cars are going to be electric. They're going to need charging stations. You're going to have to install charging stations throughout the municipality. So the recommendation is put them where you want tourists to go. I know you could easily put charging stations here at the municipal office. This is a nice building, but I don't know how many tourists want to hang around here for a few hours while their car is charging. But if you put it in a commercial area or a tourist attraction, that's going to benefit everybody. Similarly, it was suggested if you set up kiosks that promote the different tourist attractions and the commercial opportunities in places where people charge their car, that they'll go to the kiosk, you have QR codes, they can easily scan and get some more information. The last one about planning for the extension of municipal water and sewer services when funding becomes available. Nobody knows when funding is going to become available. And we recognize that it is cost prohibitive to try to do that now because it's just too expensive to do on your own. But provincial and federal governments have a pattern of coming up with programs from time to time where they say we're going to give preference to shovel-ready projects. Now, they never define what shovel-ready means, but the more prepared you can be, the more likely it is that you're going to get funding, because they usually give funding to the projects that are the most ready. And when the funding runs out, you're out of luck. Health and social services, you can make the point as well, that's not really your responsibility. There are other public sector agencies that have responsibility for this. May not be your direct responsibility, but it has a huge impact on all the residents here. And it has a huge economic impact. People will be hesitant to move to a location where there's not health services. I think we're starting to realize the economic benefits of preventative health measures. Mental health, there's more awareness of just what a big impact it has on our society. So there's all kinds of reasons why you need to be involved. And a lot of it's going to be working with your community partners again. And I think you're already doing that. One of the things that was talked about, oh, sorry, next slide. I was thinking about number 4 here. Just in this building alone, you see the sharing of resources in terms of space, things like internet connectivity, parking lots. It lowers the costs for everybody, and you can provide more services with the same budget. So look for more opportunities like that because your community partners appreciate them as well. It was talked about quite a bit that you don't have a robust cohort of healthcare professionals. There's lots of different types of disciplines that could be here that aren't. There's a shortage of doctors. So anything you can do is a campaign to not only attract them, but to keep them here. And so we'll probably talk about this a little bit tomorrow in our strategic planning session about some of the things that are done elsewhere. And of course, there's responding to the challenge of the aging population. And French River is not alone. You're finding there's an awful lot of smaller communities in what I'll call cottage country that have this big bulge of people between the ages of 55 and 70 in their population graph. And that bulge is going to continue to move up as years go by. So I know you're working on something, but you're working on the right thing. It's important. Industrial activity. No, when you think of French River, you don't really think of big factories and that type of thing. And that's probably not something in your future. Without municipal water and sewers, it's a non-starter for a lot of the big operations. You look at the automotive parts manufacturers, they tend to be located closer to their the assembly plants in the big cities. But you are well positioned for what we've called the micro industries. We talk about the natural beauty. And think about the type of person that your natural beauty attracts to this region. They're the creative ones that they'll do things like they'll make crafts. They'll start microbreweries. They'll have handmade goods. I talked before about specialty cheeses, maple syrup farms, all that type of thing. Those are the types of those are the types of industries that you're going to attract here. That in turn will attract tourists. That in turn will create more jobs. That will create more stores. And it's also something that you can do in a manner that's green, that's environmentally friendly, which is becoming more and more important for our society. People are looking for that. So again, the 4 suggestions: simplify and expedite permitting processes to reduce administrative burdens and costs for small businesses. This applies to not just the industrial sector. It applies to all of the sectors. What we often hear with other clients when we do focus groups is they'll say, I met with this municipality and I asked how long it would take to get a permit, and I was told 2 years. Then I next met with the one next door and asked, and they said, well, maybe 6 weeks. Guess which one I set up in? So it has a huge impact. The other thing that we hear is, I don't want to go to the municipality and be told why I can't do something. I want them to tell me, how do I do it? And I was at a focus group in another municipality last week, and there was a debate between 2 of the participants, where the one talked about how difficult it was to get approvals, and the other one said, what are you talking about? It was quite easy. The second one said, well, I went to the township's website and it listed all of the things I needed to do to get the permit that I wanted. And when I looked at how ready I was, I realized that I had to change my design because I was too close to the road. I had this, I had that. So it took me a few days to make the changes in my plans, but once I submitted it, I got approved right away. So something as simple as just having the process and what the rules are readily available on your website makes a big difference to somebody thinking about setting up a business. You're going to see a number of times organizing marketing initiatives, festivals, fairs, that type of thing. Oops, back up a little bit. These all feed together because they're of interest to local residents, but they're also of interest to tourists, to visitors. Your biggest infrastructure asset is your roads. You put an awful lot of work into your roads. You're going to need to keep doing it because the roads are vital to everything you want to do. And again, we talk about partnerships. This is again something you could probably do with the Chamber of Commerce. We're facilitating network opportunities. So people that come in get to understand how to do business in the community. They make contacts, they learn. French River, when you think of French River, agriculture isn't what jumps to mind as one of your strengths, but it's something that is essential. That you do have more agriculture here than I had realized. And there's a lot of benefits from that. It's not just that when the supply chains get disrupted, that you still have access to something to eat, but the food's going to be fresher. It's going to be better. It's going to be healthier. And also, I don't know if we all realize just how much farming can reduce our carbon footprint, that it's a very useful part of our economy. A challenge across all of rural Ontario is protecting farmland and farm operations from development. I grew up on a farm, and I know what happened is they allowed the farms at that time to have one severance, usually for the parents as they're retiring, so the younger generation could take over, which was fine until that house got sold to someone who wanted to live in the country, and then discovered that, livestock has a smell, not just when they're in the barn, but when they're putting some of their products on the fields. Farmers tend to work around the clock at certain times of year, and those tractors can be noisy. So all of a sudden you had complaints from someone about the farmer who's been doing what the farmer needs to do in order to survive. And it's also, we have a limited amount of farmland, so try to protect the farmland that we do have. But it's also beneficial if you can keep your development in the settlement areas through infilling, because when you're plowing the roads, if you've got 20 houses on a road instead of 10, you're able to get that much more service provided to your residents with basically the same time and the same cost as what it was with the fewer houses. One thing that came up, which was not expected, but it's about municipal drains. But when we research it, it's actually becoming a problem across a lot of Ontario. More and more farms now have systematic tile drainage. So the water gets to the drains quicker. So those drains have to be monitored and cleaned out at appropriate times. It's not actually mentioned here, but something you should probably look at when you're doing it is a bit of a public education process. That municipal drains tend to be named after the farm where they originated, or it might be the name of the farmer who had that farm a number of years ago. But usually you add some of the costs of maintenance to the tax bill for everyone who's benefiting from it. And so you get your tax bill and you say, why are you charging me for cleaning out, Mr. Schneider's drain? Like, Mr. Schneider should be paying it, not realizing that, well, it's got that name, but it's actually servicing quite a number of homeowners, residence owners. I understand you do have a farmer's market in town, but it was suggested that it needs to be supported because it could easily die out, that there's a lot of work required to keep it running. So any support that can be provided to promote it is going to make it that much easier for it to thrive and to flourish. I think it's becoming eye-opening just how much recreation has to do with economic development. That people who are going to come here, for whether it's to live or whether it's to visit, they want recreational opportunities. And it's a very integral part of economic development. It attracts people, and particularly if you're trying to attract young families. And I think you realize there is a shortage of young families in the area. So what you can do here is vital. What's also key to this is to have a good recreation program. You need lots of volunteers. Many municipalities lost their volunteers over COVID, and it's difficult to get them back. Some are finding they're getting actually a different cohort of volunteers. They tend to be younger. But what you can do to encourage volunteers to come out and give up their time, give up their skills, their expertise, without that, you're not going to be able to have the recreational programs that you want. So our first recommendation is have recreational programs and activities for residents of all ages. And of course, to do that, you need volunteers. We're also suggesting in recommendation number 2, one of the nice things about being a kid is if you can walk to your neighborhood playground. And this also then is in alignment with infilling, so you get a higher density in your settlement areas. So establish standards for the different sizes of settlement areas that you have and what you're going to provide, whether it's a neighborhood park, whether it's a soccer field, whatever. You're not going to be able to put really expensive, an arena or that type of thing in every little settlement area. But if you can provide something, so set standards and then provide those. We mentioned numerous times that it would be fantastic if you had a recreation complex, which was quickly followed by the recognition that that's not feasible right now. But what we're recommending is pick a site where it should go, and then make sure that your planning decisions over the next number of years are consistent with that site being used for a recreation complex. I've spent a lot of my time in the education sector, and we would typically find that a school board or a college that was growing quickly and ran out of space would use portables. And when they finally got the funding to put up an addition or a new building, the perfect spot for it was on top of the portables. And they were stuck because it's probably be about 2 years to build the new building. They needed those portables for the students. So they either ended up with a huge cost trying to make a temporary arrangement, or they put the building in the place that was not ideal. So if you can pick a site now, and you may find that you're putting in something like a pickleball court, or there's another activity that's going to need parking that can be shared, or where you're going to put water and sewers. There's lots of things that you want to make sure are going to align with that long-term plan. Now, related to that is partnering with your neighboring municipalities and your neighboring Indigenous groups. If you're going to fund it in a major project, it's not the capital cost, which is the biggest concern, it's the operating costs. That sometimes government programming or government funding that's available to help with the capital costs, but then you're stuck with something that loses money every year. And maybe an example is arenas. I'm not aware of any single ice surface arena that does not lose money, and often substantial amounts of money. So if you can partner, if you have a recreation complex with a swimming pool and a gym and that type of thing, if you can partner with a neighboring municipality to provide that resource quicker for all of your residents and to share in not only the capital costs, but the operating costs, it's going to benefit everybody. And tourism. As you talked about earlier, this is the bedrock of your economic development. It's going to be the main driver. Everything else will feed off of it. We think there's great promise for future growth. What French River has to offer, a lot of people want. I think as a society, we're becoming more interested in the balance, the work-life balance. There's a lot to be said about what French River has to offer. As more and more people work from home, they want to live in this type of community. And just like all of the others, it's not just the direct jobs, but it's the spin-off jobs, the indirect jobs that when you bring tourists here, it's not just the things that they're buying, it's the people who are making those things, the people that are transporting those things. And I think one of the other things that we're kind of aware of is that physical activity is good for us. It's good for our mental health, it's good for our physical health. And what you offer here is very much physical activity. Think of all the activities that people do here. They're primarily physical. So we're always hesitant to recommend to a municipality that they spend more money. But one thing that did come up quite a few times was to establish a municipal tourism department to help to coordinate, to market. And how you do that is the challenge. Do you reorganize, reallocate the resources? You find a way to get additional revenues? But it is something which, if this is the bedrock of your economic development, this is something you should be looking at. Now, part of this can be all of the advantages we have with automation and technology, that things can become streamlined so that it's much more efficient, much less labor intensive. We won't go into the details of how to do this because it's beyond my pay scale, but there are ways to make it so it is less labor intensive. Now, the fourth one here, I'm not sure how much you're aware of this. There's a program that the province has where municipalities can use Crown lands for camping. And I think most people recognize that anyone can go on Crown land and camp for 14 days, but this is different. This is where the municipality actually sets up campsites. And I think the best way to describe them is they would be backcountry campsites where there's a fire pit and there's a tent site or a place to park a travel trailer or a motorhome. There's not a washroom, but there's a thunderbox. And I think you know what a thunderbox is. So it's an on-service site, but the municipality takes reservations, they charge for it. Now, the drawback is you can't take the revenues that you generate from these campsites and put them into general revenues. You have to reinvest them in the campsites themselves or in ancillary parts of it. So typically, if you've got your campsites, the extra money that you don't need to develop and to maintain the campsites could be invested in hiking trails that are contiguous with the campsites. So I know that there are similar municipalities that are raising several $100,000 a year through this. Now they have to reinvest it, so it's not just extra money, but it allows them to attract more people into the community. And anecdotally, we're told that there are not a lot of transient campsites available in French River, that the ones that there were available during COVID tended to get turned into seasonal campsites. So it can be difficult for someone who wants to come for just a short period of time, but there are people who want to come here for a 1 week or a 2 week, or maybe even a one night visit. So whatever you can do to accommodate them is going to help you. So you should also recognize this slide. This was also from Dr. Martin. The keys to successful strategic planning. I know this is economic development. I think they apply. The choices that you make, you need to specify some things you're going to do and some things you're not going to do. Are they integrated? Do they fit together and reinforce one another? Do they specify a territory? In this case, it's probably the tourism, hospitality sector, and the quality of life. And can you win with it? Is this something that is French River positioned to do better at these things than anybody else? So the way to assess these recommendations, I suggest, is to look at those four categories. And do they all work? So you've had to listen to me drone on for the better part of a half an hour. So now it's up to you. Are the guiding principles the right ones? Do they capture what you want to have captured? And do you agree with the strategic actions? Are there some that we left out? Are there some that we should have, that we have in that shouldn't be in? And I forgot to mention one thing that was talked about this morning is the need for English language schools and English language daycare. That we heard that the fact that there is not an English language high school here discourages people from moving here or staying here. The fact that English language daycare is not available is sort of a double whammy because there are qualified staff who would like to work in a daycare, but they're Anglophone and there are no job opportunities for them. So we can talk later whether that's something which should be incorporated into the economic master plans, whether that's overarching enough to put it into the strategic plan, but it should be mentioned someplace.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. I'm not sure if anybody has questions, but I think we're gonna wait it off till tomorrow. We do have a strategic plan session planned out from 9 till 4 for council and Steve and Sebastian, I guess. We're gonna go over this presentation and come up with some kind of a strategic plan to move forward within the community. So we thank you very much and we'll see you in the morning.
Thank you.
So we'll continue on with reports and items for consideration. 6.2.1, we have a resolution to authorize a funding application to the Community Enhancement Program, Enhance Your Community, for the Novel Community Center Improvement Projects, Roof, Fascia, and Addition. So,
I think you skipped something.
oh, the update. I was moving forward. Okay, do we want to do the finance before we do the OPP, or do you want me to go back and come back?
It's up to you.
Well, since
You're-
I already said that whole big phrase, we'll just get a mover and a seconder to open this one up.
You want to repeat it?
No, a resolution to authorize the funding application. I need a mover, Counselor Bob and Counselor Will.
It is duly moved and seconded, but resolved that council authorizes the funding application to the Community Enhancement Program, Enhance Your Community, through NOHFC for the Novel Community Center Improvement Projects for an amount of $1 million. And further that the sum of $1,701,466 towards total project costs of $2,701,466 be committed to this project by the municipality and resolves to cover any project related cost overruns should they be incurred.
Do we have any questions or? No, we are good. All in favor? Okay. So now we're gonna go to 6, general government, 6.1.1, an
Yeah.
update on the proposed closure of the OPP Novel detachment, and Mayor Pajot will speak to this.
Well, nothing to hold your breath about. So today we did, this morning we did meet with Infrastructure Ontario and the OPP. And they explained to us some of the different programs, the way that they operate, and possibly ways to keep the detachment open. So now what we're waiting for is an official letter from Infrastructure Ontario inviting us to submit officially our decisions. And at that time, we'll bring it back to council because we're entering a phase where it's going to have to be confidential, and we'll report back through closed sessions. And then once it's ready to be public, then we'll make it public. But we're not further behind.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Pajot. Anybody have any questions for Giselle, or are we good with the report? Okay, seeing none, we'll continue. 6.3, Public Works and Environmental Services. This one, we are going to keep the waste management operations for the last part of this. So we'll start with the resolutions first. This way giving us more time to go over the report. So we'll start with 6.3.2, a resolution to award the contract for wood grinding services at the Novel landfill site. And I need a mover and a seconder for this, Counselor Dave and Counselor Dean.
It is duly moved and seconded, but resolved that council awards the contract for wood grinding services at the Nova landfill site to Northern Bulk Logistics for the amount of 25,400 plus applicable taxes.
Does anybody have any questions? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Okay, 6.4 recreation and community services, no. 6.5 emergency and protection services. 6.5.1, a resolution to adopt a bylaw to authorize the Fire Dispatch Communications Center Service Agreement. It's a renewal with the town of Smith Falls. There's a report in there, so I need a mover and a seconder. Counselor Roger and Counselor Bob.
It is duly moved and seconded, but resolved that bylaw 2023-41, being a bylaw to authorize the Fire Dispatch Communications Center Services Agreement with the town of Smiths Falls, be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed.
Does anybody have any questions for Rock? Counselor
You,
View. Great.
thank you through you, Madam Chair. I'm just wondering if the terms are all the same as before, or is there any changes?
There's no changes. All the terms are the same. It's just the 5-year extension with the CPI and taxes.
5 years.
5 years, yes.
Thank you.
Counselor Will.
Through you, Madam Chair. I'm through reading it, I noticed that any one of the party can discontinue the agreement at any time. Do we have a contingency plan in place? I would assume we do, but I have to ask that question.
If it does happen, yes, I do have a backup plan temporarily. We would have to staff our own station for now, but there is other departments out there that do offer this service, Northern 911, other fire departments in Southern Ontario also.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions? Okay, seeing none. You already read the resolution, so are we all in favor? Okay, good. So building, planning and development is nil. And now we're gonna go back to 6.7, which will be waste management operations. And we have a report from Kevin.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Tonight, I guess we're going last tonight. It's gonna be a long one. Yeah, so tonight we're gonna go through waste management operation report. Resolution was adopted December 2022, and staff was directed to further report and analyze on curbside collection, extension to the curbside recycling program, and financial considerations. That includes 4 items. So we're gonna start with item 1. Cost of continuing the current transfer site option for Albin and Noelville only, with modified hours similar to the Noelville site. So for current operations at the modified sites, we would have 60 haul-all bins, 2 haul-all trucks, an attendance station for Noelville, and telecommunications. For Albin, we would have the site relocation, so it wouldn't be where it is originally now, it's going to be pushed to the back. That'd be clearing, brushing and leveling, the fencing, aggregates, attendance station, and the telecommunications, with the total capital cost estimated at 1.861 million. For operational for this system, annual would be the amortization of the bins and other capital items, amortization of the trucks over 7 years, interest on capital loans, maintenance costs, maintenance materials, fuel, waste, recycling collection, in-house attendance stations, the attendants themselves for 2-3 days a week. And we just followed the Sunday to Wednesday, like how it is in the level now. Telecommunications, software licensing, marketing and promotion, site maintenance, and then curbside recycling. So annual operating costs is $616,962. And including the curbside recycling, is just put that option in case this was one of the options that council decided, then if they wanted to, if you guys wanted to go ahead with curbside recycling as well on top of the transfer station. Quick analysis, to operate transfer sites as per the new Ontario Regulation 391-21 made under Resource Recovery and Circular Economy Act 2016, the municipality is required to offer blue box services at every location that waste collection is offered. The costing above reflects the legislation requirements as well as the continuation of curbside recycling service to actively promote the diversion of recyclable materials from our landfill site. That's why I know we were directed to put just garbage, but we had to also add the recycling bins as well. The landfill currently has 13 years remaining of its lifespan, and the municipality currently has not received any feedback from the Ministry of Environment on the environmental assessment that was submitted in 2022 for the approval of our phase 2 and 3. Other municipalities do not operate the haul system to its full capacity like we do. The municipalities that do utilize the system do so in a hybrid manner with curbside garbage and recycling. So as staff, we researched Seguin Township, which is similar in demographics, and the system they currently utilize is outlined in number 2. The current system deliverable timelines for the compact garbage recycling vehicle is looking to be 18 to 24 months, we were told. Purchase of equipment, installation of site alterations beyond our timeline for the recycling funding changes and proposal to the Circular Materials Ontario for the regulations. Public education, submit changes to circular materials by February of 2024. So the pros is we already know how the system runs, and it's kind of an easy, we know what we're getting into with it. Some of the cons are we're reinvesting the same system and site modifications. We will continue to provide the same operational challenges. New equipment and bins will be subject to the breakdowns, service interruptions, and costly repairs. Modification to the site will present challenges with staff resources and site maintenance. Recycling programs that are run through depot stations are subject to waste composition studies to determine recycling funding amounts. So if we go to item number 2, this will be the cost of contracting out the entire transfer site system to an independent contractor for the Noelville and Alvin sites only with modified hours. Manethville and Shaw Road transfer sites would close. The cost will include opening the landfill 5 days a week. So for modified sites, the compactable bins at Alvin, again, site relocation behind the building, clearing, brushing, leveling, fencing, aggregates, telecommunications, 3-phase hydro, concrete slabs and blocks, the compactor bins, installation, engineering, and an attendance station. And then Noelville, 3-phase hydro, concrete slabs, the compactable bins, installation, engineering, attendance station, telecommunications, 2 extra bins, and software. Capital costs of $865,408. And for operational costs, for Noelville, we have an attendant for 3 days a week, Sunday to Wednesday. Telecommunications, Alvin, we have the site relocation. So we have another attendant for 10-hour days, 3 days a week, and telecommunications. Both locations, amortization of bins, amortization of the additional 2 bins, interest on the capital loan, repairs, maintenance of the compactor and site, marketing and promotion. Then we'll have the contracted costs of the 40-yard roll-off bins, dump and return waste, 40-yard roll-off directly to the processing, because the recycle will just go straight from there to the recycling facility. And then curbside recycling. So the annual operating cost estimate at 616,840. And if you include curbside recycling, 748,240. A bit of analysis on that timeline for implementation of the new system. We're thinking 4 to 6 months. So that's 12 to 14 weeks delivery of equipment. Engineering of the concrete slabs, we're unsure of yet. Development of and post request for tender award contracts, submit changes to the CMO by February 2024. Site altercations and public education. Pros, utilizing contractor services alleviates an operator from daily waste collection operation. It also reduces the amount of operational assets required by the municipality and mechanics' time spent on repairs and maintenance costs. Cons, all breakdowns to the compactors would require a contracted technician, which could be costly. There would be an operational challenges surrounding technicians' availability, site maintenance, and staff resources. The municipality would require keeping additional stock of hydraulic cylinders from compactors and recycling programs that are run through depot stations are subject to the waste composition studies to determine recycling funding amounts. This is just some of that information is just brought from Segwin because that's kind of the system they're running with the compactor 40-yard bins and kind of the challenges they run through. And then we're going to go to item 3. The cost of contracting household waste and recycling curbside pickups on Mondays to accommodate our seasonal residents. This will include opening the landfill site 6 days a week. Curbside recycling, curbside garbage for capital, none. Operational annual curbside recycling, and then curbside garbage program, marketing and promotion, total annual cost 425,400. And then to operate our landfill for the Sunday, for the extra day, landfill attendant and operator, equipment and cover materials, total annual cost of 108,754. Quick analysis, costing includes Monday garbage pickups for seasonal residents. So it's kind of a premium because it's on holidays and stuff that does bring the price up a bit. The timeline for implementation 4 to 6 months, just to develop a post request for tender and award a contract. Public education. Some pros, no capital investment for the municipality. Utilization of contractor provides additional staff resources for operations. There'd be no more repairs and maintenance on our collection vehicles and site maintenance. Waste reduction acceptance can be controlled at the source of pickup. The municipality would not be required to complete a waste composition study to meet the recycling funding. Requirements for the recycling program and related costs would no longer be sourced through taxation. Cons, the municipality could potentially see startup challenges with contractor routes and truck capacity, as we are unaware how much each household is currently generating weekly. And we currently have no limit on waste disposal. The municipality would have additional operating costs associated with Sunday landfill operations, which could also impact equipment repairs and maintenance. And then item 4, it's just for the shed modifications for the private roads. Because we already have the sheds, we're assuming we can utilize them for all our islanders and our private roads. So we would just rubberize and add drains to the sheds that are already there. And then budget implications. All initiatives presented are going to take staff resources and have potential budgetary considerations. This item represents the lowest cost alternatives as compared to items 1 and 2. Annual tax levy increases as a result of adopting items 1 or 2. And this is for operations only. Graph doesn't show the capital purchases for the equipment. Under the Ontario regulations, curbside recycling costs will be borne by the manufacturers effective April 25th or April 2025, correction. Therefore, will be removed from the operating budget of the municipality from that date. Conclusion, the recommendation is for council to approve February of 2024, a permanent solution for a municipal waste collection system to meet the 2025 deadline for Ontario regulations. And I know there's going to be some questions.
No question. Just wondering who, thank you, Kevin, for the report and everybody who worked on it. I guess, who wants to go first with questions?
Well, since I don't mind.
Okay, we're gonna start with Mayor Pajot, but I think what is we're probably we'll discuss this tonight. And if it's not done, we will bring it again to the next meeting for more questions, depending on how late we plan on staying here tonight. So we'll start the conversation anyway. So go ahead, Mayor Pajot.
Thank you, Kevin and Michelle, for putting this together. I didn't get a chance to read all your answers, but one of the things I need to know is for curbside recycling, the whole idea that when we approve curbside recycling was to meet our obligations under the legislation so that we can get it down to below the 4%, 5%. But if there was nowhere that, and we took down the bins, the recycling bins at each of the transfer sites. The recycling is being hauled off to North Bay, correct? And so a couple of things. If we're going to keep some sort of form of bin site, and I'm not saying which one or any, why would we be obligated? Because we meet our legal obligations under the legislation to make sure that we offer curbside recycling to everyone. And when it was brought to us, there was an assumption that the bins would be staying. So did we bring this up just to marry into a curbside garbage pickup? Because I think I can't see why we're not meeting our obligations under the legislation and why we would have to provide recycling bins over at the sites when we don't now. So are we in violation of the regulations right now?
Through you, Madam Chair, just to quickly, so when staff brought this to council, it was to buy time because of our aging bins. We do not have the resources. This was just to buy time for council to make a decision. There was nothing else other than that. I will say that the pilot program is working great because we do have a 0% contamination rate as it sits right now because we're not picking up from those sites. We are not under that legislation yet. It's not until 2026 that we got to do it. So right now, this doesn't matter to us, but when we do switch over to that date, we will have to follow guidelines. And if you do have open transfer sites, we're being told now by neighboring municipalities that are going to stick to that. They're going to lose 25% of funding right off the bat. And you're going to have to report every week or every quarter, I believe it is. I think Michelle would be able to answer that better. Just so you would have to do that just to keep up to receive your funding. And there's just a lot more that goes along having transfer sites that aren't manned.
But we have curbside pickup, so all our numbers are incorporated in that, right? So then when we're reporting back to the government sees, yes, they've got curbside pickup. They're servicing, I don't know how many households. And then, well, I guess we would know that because of the tonnage, right? We get charged by the tonnage, am I correct? So we know how many tons of recyclables that we're getting. And so I guess to me, it doesn't make any sense to have curbside pickup and being forced to do the bins as well. And I'm not quite sure that the government would be unhappy with us if they knew that we were doing even more on our recycling than doing bins, correct?
Through you, Madam Chair, it's just the legislation, how it's laid out. If you're gonna, anywhere it states that if you're gonna offer these transfer stations with waste, you have to have a recycling option there. So we will have that. Like, that's how this legislation is. So
Right.
that's, I believe Mark would like to speak on.
Through
that.
you, Madam Chair, just to clarify. So council at one point, depending on whichever options they consider, will have the option of discontinuing the curbside recycling, which presents its own challenges. But the legislation as of 2025, when we do our transition, is very clear. And I've copied that part of the legislation in your answers in saying that you have to operate as many recycling bins at your depots as you do waste collection. And I'm not sure how you get out of that. But, you know, council has the decision whether to go a hybrid model, which you operate both, or you can operate the curbside and the depots at the same time, but at additional cost, as was laid out in the presentation.
But if this is making an assumption that if you have your, what do you call it, your depot collections, so your transfer sites, like that you have to have recycling. But if we meet our obligation for recycling, and the whole idea is to make sure that people recycle, that we're doing that we could probably qualify for an exception of that. And as you know, because it's new legislation, the regulations aren't all quite done yet.
Through you, Madam Chair, we're already experiencing it, as staff reported, we're experiencing what we're collecting 0% contamination, both at the curbside and proud to announce at the landfill itself as well. So to answer your question, there's still about, correct me if I'm wrong, Michelle or Kevin, about 20 tons that we've lost in recycling where people are refusing to use the current system that we have in place and automatically sending all the recyclables we're assuming to the landfill. So part of the legislation is tried to capture that in terms of trying to divert that lost tonnage to your landfills. So I can understand a little bit where the legislation is coming from. I'm trying to understand where you're coming from. So there's two things that council needs to consider. So do you still want to continue operating the curbside once you've made your decision, or eliminate the curbside recycling and go with a full depot with both recycling and garbage? So you can operate both if you wish. There's an additional cost to that.
Right, but that doesn't make any sense.
Well, I'm just interpreting the legislation and the information that we've received from the Circular Materials Ontario at this point in time. And that information is changing on a consistent basis. There's other information that we'll be sharing council in the upcoming weeks of additional information. As they're rolling out their transition, which started in June of this year, if I'm not mistaken, Michelle, because it was phased into 3 years, we happen to be in the 3rd year, they're encountering some challenges as well.
I would imagine.
Yeah.
And how much tonnage of recyclables do we get from curbside right now?
For you, Madam Chair. Sorry about that. So this is all. Yeah, so the month of June, 3.58 tons, July, 7.92, August, 10 tons, September, 9.15. So that's our monthly here through the busy season.
So in 4 months, we're looking at about 10, 20, almost 30 tons in 4 months, which is, I think, good, right? And so if that's not going into our landfill, then that should be saving room in our landfill because it's going to North Bay and not to Noelville, correct? So there is some good news about our recycling program that saves, and that was one of the arguments that was made when we were trying to decide about doing curbside recycling, not just to meet our obligations for the contamination percentage, but also to help save our and put years onto our landfill. So it's been successful in doing that by the amount of tonnage that we've been not depositing into our landfill, and that's not coming back contaminated. Because my understanding, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but our contamination rate, when I was looking at some of the old reports, ranged anywhere between 40 and 80% contamination rate. So that was going into our landfill, and that was problematic, and that was a huge issue, which I agree.
Through you, Madam Chair. Just to answer your question, Madam Mayor, it's actually, that actually wasn't going into our landfill. It was going in North, we were paying for it to go in North Bay. So what we're, this 22 tons is actually coming into our site. So it's worse off now. So
The
we were-
22 tons
we were-
of what?
Of the recycling, the variance from 2022 to 2023,
But how do
or
we
sorry,
know-
this quarter, it's just based from 2022 to 2023. With this, we're missing like low number 22.38 tons of recycling.
Of recycling?
Yeah.
So how do we know? So if people are putting their garbage, and I know there are some people that are not putting their blue boxes out. And they're probably just putting it into green bags and throwing them in the bins is my assumption, because if they won't put it in a blue box, they're not going to drive to the landfill to bring it there, right? So how do you measure that? Like, how do you know in a bag of garbage, how much is recycling?
Through you, Madam Chair. So it's just the stats that we have going from last year. Like every month, like we go through our quarters of what we're receiving. So I'll just let Michelle, she's gonna rhyme this off for us.
Take a break, take a break.
Yep. Okay. So we did just an overall for our stats for in comparison to 2022. So we took June to September, our busiest times, and we did the rollout of program in June. So we looked at those numbers and we've seen that we had complete clean tonnage. However, we were 20 tons less than we were in 2022. And we've seen an increase in volumes of recyclable materials over the last 5 years. So we're either missing that 20 tons that has gone into the garbage, which is what we assume, because we do not assume that we're going down in recyclable materials. So, and a piece of that is because there's not an opportunity at the bin sites, like you said, to deposit their recycling. Is just waste.
Okay.
So how much did it cost us in the contaminated recycling that was being shipped to North Bay before? Like versus now it's not costing us anything because it's not contaminated, and we have that extra 20,000 going to the landfill, but how much is it not costing us in contaminated soil at the other end? Sorry, Giselle.
So the contamination that we had in 2022 compared to 2023 for those months was 50 tons of contamination, and we were paying $93.75 a ton for the contamination, but we were paying for it twice because we got weighed at the scale when we pulled in for that tonnage. And then they weighed the material after they had separated, and then they charged us the $93.75 for that tonnage. So I don't have the clear number there, but that's the.
So 93.75 times 2 times 50,000,
No, not 50,000, just 50.
just 50.
Yep.
50 tons. And that's what we're saving money wise, but then it's in our dumps. Like, because people are recycling it, right? It's not going to the recycling, it's actually going to our landfill.
Yeah, it's just through you,
Yeah,
Madam Chair.
go
I'd
ahead.
just like to state, like, we're not saving anything. Landfill space is very expensive. Right? We have 13 years left how we're sitting. And the more we can save in our landfill, like we don't know what it's going to cost us if we don't get an expansion, or if we have to close. We're looking at, tens of millions of dollars to do so. So that little fee, like every ton that comes in is missed in recycling, is costing. It will cost us a lot in the long run. So.
Go
Just to
ahead.
clarify, so all the recycling, the curbside recycling comes back to us, right? Is that what you're telling me, or does it stay in North Bay or wherever they go? in
Through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, it goes
recycling,
straight to North Bay. When it gets picked up, it goes straight to North Bay.
and it stays there.
It stays there and they process it. It's just the missing 20 tons that we're talking about.
Right.
That we're assuming is going into the waste right now.
Right. And so let's say that curbside pickup occurs for garbage. Where does that garbage go?
That will go to our landfill site.
Right,
But
right.
when you,
So that's not saving our landfill by doing curbside.
it's the limits, then you can limit at the curb. So right
Yeah.
now, people can put out, 14 bags a week per house as the bylaw is written,
Yeah,
which is a lot of waste, where you'll go down to 2 to 3 bags, whatever council sets as a limit a week instead of 14 bags. So
Right, but
that
there's
right
no-
now, they
yeah,
can
nothing
put whatever
stopping
they
people
want.
from going to the landfill. They get 2 bags a week, like say, and then go to the landfill for the other 10. I can't imagine that people putting that much garbage out, but what do I know, right?
That's where the software that we're talking about, we'll be able to track where these places are coming from. So if someone is showing up every day with 4 bags of garbage, we could put limits through bylaws or
Mhm.
however council would like to go forward.
Right.
Okay,
Dave
I'd
had-
let Counselor Bob speak for a minute and then we'll come back. Counselor Bob?
Thank you to you, Madam Chair. And I'll give you, Madam Mayor, a break. First of all, thank you for doing the report. I wake up at night and I think of Christmas gifts. I hope you guys don't wake up at night and think about garbage. Correct me if I'm wrong, if by putting in a limit, a garbage bag limit per week, per household, it might be tough love, but we're kind of forcing, I think, forcing the residents of recycling more, which will be less garbage. Yes, I do agree. Some people will go to the landfill site, but I think most people will see that, well, I can just recycle and an extra bin will help the garbage. Anyway, that's my feeling. Could you just, and I think I have it in my mind, the two pickups a week, you mean 2 different days, but only once per household, doing the seasonal roads. I can't think of a seasonal road, say Dry Pine Bay area would be picked up Mondays. Is that the thought process behind it?
Through you, Madam Chair. We just got a rough estimate because we did not go out to tender or pricing. So what we have talked to about contractor was they said to do this run approximately be 3 trucks. So to get any seasonal, we would do from what this is just, talk right now. They think to cover it would take 2 trucks on a Monday and then 1 truck on another day in the week. So the Monday would be try to covering all the waterfront seasonal people. That way that's not sitting out. They can leave it in a box or however they're going to do it. And they can be picked up right away. So there's no sitting around for a week.
Thank you.
So I have a question maybe for Mark can answer this. What is our current budget? What do we currently spend on garbage annually? Like I know in here in the question reports, it says 374,850, but that is for staff repairs and maintenance. What is the actual cost of everything?
The just a general cost, what happens is that there's a trucks, the actual trucks and also the labor and also the contractor is different. I'll have to get back to you because it's different budgets. Public Works, there's the fuel is and the repairs is in the Public Works and then the contracting is that there's a recycling cost and also garbage costs. So I'll have to get back to you on the actual cost.
Okay, but we know that right now our recycling cost is 130,000 a year.
Yes, the curbside, but there's also Yeah, the curbside recycling, yes, but there's also recycling, I believe, from the landfill to North Bay. So there's additional cost than the, other than the curbside recycling.
Okay, and how about reserves? What do we have in reserves for landfill and for waste management? Like this says negative for vehicles, like for equipment,
Yes,
but do we not have a separate reserve just for the landfill?
yes, we have a separate reserve for landfill. And it's, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it's $400,000 or $500,000. But that's gonna help with the closure also of the landfill sales and all that. So there's a closure, there's cost to closing a landfill, so you have to budget for that or have a reserves. And there's also a liability associated with the landfill. And every year you have to account for that and record the liability and the hit. And in the operating budget, there's also a cost every year to estimate the closing costs that will occur in
Matt.
13 to 15.
Okay.
years.
Thank you. So option one would close Shaw and Manettville, right? Or is that only option two that would close those options? Or item two, item one?
Through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, it actually is for 1 and 2. That's.
So it closed both. So right now these costs would be like, this is what it would cost us. And right now, our current system we've had for 20 years, give or take. 20 years we've had the bins. And so if I look at this, we are looking at option one would cost us roughly 130,000 a year. And option two would cost us roughly 80,000 a year if we're doing it over a 20-year period. If it's amortized over 20 years to pay it back, because this current system has lasted us 20 years, right? The system that we have has been in place for 20 years.
Through you, Madam Chair, if I
Yeah.
can jump in. So the municipality made the decision in 2003, purchased an initial truck and these initial bins. Correct me if I'm wrong, 60 or 70 bins, which are depleting very quickly because they're rotting out because we've
Yeah.
had them 20 years. In the midst of that, we invested into another truck at approximately just over $400,000, somewhere in that neighborhood. So that has just been amortized. So you can't amortize things over 20 years because it's very clear in our audited financial statements what are acceptable amortization periods for certain pieces of equipment.
And what would it be for this?
So
15 years?
for
Yeah.
vehicles, we're looking at approximately 7 years. And for the bins, I'm thinking it's 10 or 12 years. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Treasurer, Mark.
At the beginning, they were amortized over 20 years, but they didn't last because it was an estimate, because it was the first time that we had the bins. But it was discovered that 20 years was too long. They were breaking down before the 20 years. And that's why we have the 10 years.
It's down to 10 years
amortization,
now.
yes.
Okay. And then,
And
So there-
if I may, Madam Chair,
Yeah.
I think the numbers quoted in terms of operational of the garbage do not incorporate the amortization of that equipment initially. And the replacement of the truck and the addition of the new bins and the secondary truck we purchased from Laurentian University.
the old.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just if we want to compare apples to apples.
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to figure out numbers on how much it costs on a yearly basis for garbage with what we have now, how long it's lasted, and what we're looking at doing in the future. And the recycling that we put in that I also thought, like Giselle, was to save and prepare us for the 2025. Not saying that it's bad what we've done, because it's actually educating people how to recycle properly. It's been good for that. It's working. But obviously, if we keep the bin system, we still need to offer Kurt some bins for recycling at the bins. So I'm just looking at trying to put all the apples and the money and the everything together. So I'll let somebody else ask questions.
Through you, Madam Chair, I had I had quite a few questions and I only received a response today. So I need time actually to digest that, those responses, but I'm having a hard time understanding with this regulation, how it is that that it's mandated that we need recycling bins in locations where we have bulk collection of garbage. I need to do further research to comprehend that. And I guess through some of the discussion that we're having now is I guess some of these regulations aren't set in stone and can be moved. These benchmarks can be moved. So maybe through our current actions with the success of the recycling program, maybe we can alleviate some of these mandates with respects to the placement of a recycling facility or bin alongside every garbage collection site. That's all I have to add now. I'd like to have an opportunity to digest and further get into the information. Thank you.
Counselor Dave?
Through you, Madam Chair. Just my understanding of why they would want to have the recycling in the same place as a waste depot is if somebody comes there and they have their waste and they're recycling with them and they see, well, there's nowhere to put my recycling, it's going in the garbage. That's what I understand why they would do that. To me, that's this.
But is that not why we took the recycling out of there? So people would be forced to use the recycling at home every 2 weeks? Like
Yes,
that's
but
why
if-
the recycling
But
bins
if,
were
but if
taken
they
out.
don't recycle and there's nobody there to watch them and they come with their recycling, they're not gonna go to the dump or bring it back home. They're gonna put it in the garbage bin. That's what's gonna happen. That's what I understand from that legislation.
Through you, Madam Chair, I was hoping through education that we could have sidestepped that expectation of people arriving to these sites dual-handed and knowing that there was a proper collection site for X and a proper collection site for Y. That's just my comment.
I think Counselor Dean, you had questions?
I think one of the reasons that we've thought all along about curbside pickup was we are trying to get away from a bin system that never worked properly. That we were always having problems with. People will not participate the way it's supposed to be done at those bins. And I don't see how that will change if we continue any of the bins. I recognize that there is a problem with people who won't put out curbside recycling. And I think that's what we're going to have to deal with. And I don't know just how we're going to do it. Education, no matter what we've tried in the past, hasn't always worked. But whether or not we could afford to have a bit of recycling coming in with garbage from those people who don't want to recycle on the regular basis most of the community is working well with. I guess that in my view, anyway, I'm going to try to shorten up my comments. I think we've got to go to curbside pickup for garbage. I am encouraged with most of our curbside recycling pickup. I think it's working well. I think people are pleased with it. Most people are. I just look along our road and everybody's putting the stuff out there and every Wednesday, and I'm sure that's happening all over the community. And just hearing how much tonnage is going, it means we're having a fair amount of success. We're probably never going to get everybody on side, but whatever we choose to go ahead with this. So I think we've got to look at what can we do that has the least problem or the least amount of, and I guess I'll go back to this, the least amount of stuff going into the landfill site that we don't want in the landfill site. I think that's such an important consideration. And Kevin has mentioned this, and we have a limited number of years that we are aware of at this point for that site. And the more stuff that goes in there that shouldn't, the more it shortens up those years. But I think we've got to stay with our curbside recycling. I think we better look at how can we make it work well, or to the best that we can. And maybe we're not ever going to get it 100%. But if we can convince most of our citizens to participate and for them to see the value in it, I think we have to go that way. And with all the discussion on the bins and so forth, all I know is that all the bins and all the trucks that we've had in the past have cost us a hell of a lot of money, and they all end up garbage themselves. So
Counselor
I'll
Dave.
leave it at that.
Just to add, Dean, I think what would help for to capture the extra recycling that's not going is curbside pickup for waste with a bag limit. When you have a bag limit, you can't just fill 10 bags, put them at the road. You have to recycle because you're not going to make your limit. And I think that's the only way to capture most of the recycling. You'll never get 100% of it, but most of it.
And education. Let's try to
Education.
convince people who are reluctant. Maybe we should be looking at how can we be more incentivizing financially. Maybe that's the answer. Get people thinking of what it's costing them or will cost them if they don't participate properly. I mean, we haven't looked at anything like that, but I think this whole subject is going to need a lot more thinking. And I'm adamant myself that curbside is the only answer. I don't want to see us go back to buying a lot of expensive bins and trucks and see the same thing happen that's been going on for the last 20 years. And it's actually more than that.
Counselor Will.
Just a comment on the cleanliness of the sites currently. I've noticed a real difference in the last 2 years, 2 or 3 years through education. And those sites, it was amazing what was being dropped and left. We're seeing the odd occurrence now, and I can only speak to be quite honest. I can speak only for the Alpine site. That's the one that I visit. It's amazing the progress that has been made through education, that people are now not dumping. They're only putting garbage into the bins, not leaving stuff off the side. So it's very encouraging to see that we have made some gains with respects to certain aspects. That's all I have.
Counselor Dave.
So it says in the report here too, for the current system, 2 new compactable garbage trucks or recycling vehicles would take 18 to 24 months. So if we did decide to go with this, how would we deal with it for the next 2 years without the truck? Because our trucks are already costing us a lot. So we'd have to contract it out or.
Through you, Madam Chair, just to answer the question. It's staff's belief that this system's not gonna, like what we're running right now, will not last the next season. So we will, whatever decision council decides, we will have to come up with some sort of solution for 2 years to get through, which might be a curbside contract, just to get us through to go to some bin system, but we don't know yet. That's the only thing that is almost immediate that could take over right away without going that way. I believe the CAO has something to state.
No, I just want to put a point on the table for council, just so it's not lost. The current system of operating 7 days a week, 24 hours a day has to stop. We have to put controls in no matter where, and staff doesn't have an opinion on what council wants to decide. We just need direction to be able to implement what you decide to do. But those depots are going to have to be manned to be able to have some type of control and not the free for all that is currently been going on for numerous amounts of years. In terms of the cleanliness, thank you very much for those observations, Councillor Willie. But I do have to commend the public works staff and the general staff who monitor those sites on a daily basis and on weekends to ensure that we can pick things up as quick as we can to keep them clean as well. So it's a combination of education, some residents realizing that they need to use them properly, but also a huge effort from our staff to make sure that they're properly maintained.
So this said curbside garbage pickup, 279,000. Is that a quote from a company? Is that like, where's that coming from? Curbside recycling garbage pickup. You have 279,000 here. On page 7 of 17,
Through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, it's just a rough estimate.
a rough estimate. So it doesn't, it's not an accurate, it's not from,
It's an accurate estimate.
and
Like-
so how do we know how do these companies that pick up waste, or would we go back to the way we had our own trucks like before? Or you would contract it completely out?
Just due to the size of our municipality. For us, we're too small to have we can't have a vehicle in one fleet. As you see, we run into all sorts of issues. When you're doing it in-house, you need several trucks to be able to cover off. That way, if you have a breakdown or something's wrong, you can cover off your system. But being that we're so small and we would be one vehicle, it wouldn't be worth it for us to do. We would run into a lot of issues if we were to staff like a curbside program, like a door-to-door pickup with our municipal staff.
And so the 279 comes from just an estimated, because it's not a fixed. Like you're estimating that's what it would cost in response to other municipalities using the services that are out there?
No, we got a company did give us like a rough
quote?
but it didn't go out to tender or RFI.
But you have a rough quote estimate, and that would be yearly so 425 basically would cover plus the 108. And then would we reduce the staff that we have now? That a few years ago, we added staff, we hired full-time staff to help with the trucks. The cameras that we have now, all the fencing, all that stuff that we've added throughout the years would be utilized somewhere else? Or would we let go of somebody, or what is the plan there?
Through you, Madam Chair, the fencing was bought with the particular reason to be redistributed and reused for other particular issues, because it's portable fencing, it's not permanent fencing. Secondly, staff that have been assigned to the garbage trucks would be reassigned to other departments, to Public Works and or landfill operations, because we are falling short in those staffing environments. So they'd just be reassigned to other operations within the municipality, rather than coming to council and saying we need more staff. We can just redistribute the existing staff that were assigned to those duties. And currently we're paying overtime to our staff on Saturdays and on Mondays for pickup, because we rather pay the additional costs to ensure that the bin sites are kept clean over those high use weekends, especially during the summer. And I forgot to mention, bylaw enforcement officers have played a vital role in keeping those sites clean as well through
And-
enforcement.
And so our seasonal people who currently have recycling sheds, you would call for those private roads. It says here to mix the garbage and recycling in the same unit. I don't think that's such a smart idea. Because then we'd be contaminated again, and will the recycling separate from the garbage? Because right now, if it's contaminated, they're not going to pick it up. So, and would that be offered year round and with snow plowing, and how are you guys going to work that out?
Through you, Madam Chair. So any recycling will be in the blue boxes, and then any garbage will be black bag, right? So there won't be any contamination that way. So it's for the sheds, there'll be either black bags or in a recycling bin for them to pick up. It won't be the same days of the week either. Recycling is going to be probably Wednesday. We're going to stick to the same schedule, and then garbage will be another day. But this is all none of this is anything that, like, council is deciding what we're gonna do. You're like these questions like that. We don't know yet, because no, we haven't went out to tenders. We haven't figured any of this out. We just need a direction on what council wants to offer as a level of service, and then we will come back with options. As of right now, those answers I can't give you, sorry.
Counselor, Mayor Pecho.
You're funny. I think everybody here knows how I feel, so I'm not gonna hide it. However, I don't think that I would say to keep the current system because I think it's very inefficient as it is. However, I would be very interested in getting a lot more information on contracting it out and the actual real cost. And I'd be interested in seeing, we haven't done any expressions of, what do you call that? Expressions of tender? Interest, yes, yes, yes. On different types of bins, like the roll-off bins. Like I don't see our new, well, first of all, I don't see why we need 60, but a roll-off bin would be bigger and you don't need 60 of those. And if we can get a contractor to do it, yes, it may be a little bit more expensive. However, we are serving the greater population of French River in a manner in which they want to continue to be served, even with and I believe very much so in reducing the hours as well as a cost saving measure.
Through you, Madam Chair, just to answer your question, item 2, that is what that is. Those are 40-yard roll-off bins with a compactor. And if you look at the back of the report, the appendix has the actual system at the back. So what it is the 40-yard hooks up to these and it just compacts it. And throughout you'll be able to hold about a week's worth of garbage at each site, we're estimating. But that is option 2 in this report, is for 40-yard roll-off bins.
So the attendant, would not the contractor provide an attendant? If it's their job, gig type of a thing
it would
that
be-
they supply?
It would be like their bins and their pickup, but the
Okay,
actual site is ours under our C of A.
okay,
And we own the equipment. It's just the bins and the hauling won't be ours. Everything else is staffed by us because the C of A, that's the way our C of A is right now. But also, if we do change systems, we are gonna have to go to the MOE and get a new C of A right now for all these sites.
we're contracting out. we'll
For
need a new-
any change of these
Oh,
sites. So
Yeah,
once
so no matter what we do,
whatever is being done, unless
whatever option 1, 2, or 3, you still need to get.
that is
your-
still something to be considered by council. We don't know how long that will take either.
Okay. I'm just trying to read all your answers. So you've got me at a disadvantage. That's not fun being that way. Okay, I'll let somebody else go.
Okay, Counselor Will.
Through you, Madam Chair, just a quick question. For the roll-off bins with the compactors, in comparison to having bins without compactors, what would be the frequency difference between changing them out?
Through you, Madam Chair. Again, we don't know what open transfer, like without a compactor would be. We kind of have a rough idea from visiting other townships that have the compactors. And with our amount of garbage, we're estimating like once a week pickup for each site. But we don't know how, if it's loose, we're not sure.
So you're estimating once a week per compacted. And we're not quite sure on how many times we'd have to pick up with just loosely disposed of.
Correct.
garbage. Thank you.
And that's making an assumption too in the cost that we have recyclables there, correct? Sorry. So I said that's making an assumption with the cost that's outlined in option 2 is assuming that we have recyclables in there, correct? Yes.
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, that is with recycling and waste, that it is the whole site redesigned with these 40 yards. That's why there's 3-phase hydro and stuff for the compactors. It's all an option to lay that option out. It's just very costly capital wise.
Oh, sorry,
no,
sorry.
keep going.
So if we didn't have to do, if we kept, because I believe in the curbside recycling, because I think the contamination rate is zero, as you're saying. So I would hate to lose that. But if we find out, because as Mark said, legislation's in flux because people are just starting to implement these new rules that the government made without trying it out on anybody else before. We could save money by only having to have one bin there for household, if we go contracting it out. If we're not putting any of the recycling in the other bin, then we would save the cost of the bin. And we have to buy two they're compactor bins, right? So the compactor is built into the bin. Is that how it works?
Through you, Madam Chair, it's the compactor is its own unit and then the bin hooks up to it. And then the bins just get swapped. But I don't see, I don't see the legislation changing. Much larger municipalities have pushed back on this and nothing's changed. They've stuck to. So we like, obviously if staff is directed, we will try our hardest to see where we can go with it, but I don't see it changing from having recycling and garbage at the site.
Well, a lot of things are changing in the government and with especially the government going back and fixing up things that they broke. So to me, it doesn't make any sense when a municipality is doing everything in its power to bring its responsibility to bring to zero contamination waste and have it by offering a curbside. And then because we're isolated and we're unique, and we have a bin system for household, that the government would punish us for trying to do the right thing, but the wrong thing. So it's a little weird. So, but I think time will tell with the rollout of the new legislation. So we could look at saving some money by purchasing only one at each site for now and not offering the curbside recycling. And by 2025, we will know more or less where the government's going on the recycling issue. And that would save a lot of money at the bottom dollar for contracting it out.
Through you, Madam Chair, we're just looking for directive. And as of right now, the legislation states that, so we are going to have to follow that legislation for those sites. We can't just put in one and then later come back and say we need, another $500,000 to finish off the project. But like, we're gonna try to follow what we have to do here in the legislation. But if we can reach out and see if we can change our program, but we already have done that because we were supposed to submit in 2019 what we were doing. We've already had to go in to bring our blue box program in. And now if we want to switch to a depot system, that's a whole nother set of parameters that we have to go through to see if they will accept that program to give us our funding back. This is all that's how it works. Michelle has been dealing with it more if you want to.
But in 2019, we weren't in a position to decide whether or not we were going curbside or recycling at that time. So when we made the change to curbside, no, sorry, I'm getting confused between the two. Curbside garbage. So the provisions weren't there for, and there hadn't been any real discussions back in 2019 about that until, though there was some talk at the environmental committee. But so when you put it in, it was based solely on curbside recycling with the caveat that it's going to curbside garbage too?
Through you, Madam Chair, there was nothing put in 2019. I wasn't manager of this department then.
Okay.
We didn't start this until what year? To put our 2021, we started putting in for our program, and they allowed us to go back to 2019.
Oh, okay,
They
that's
didn't-
retroactive.
So when we did it in 2021, they accepted our changes for our program that council already decided we were going to the curbside program. So that's what we have applied for.
Counselor Baum.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair, and a question to Kevin, and I believe you answered it with one of your answers to Mayor Pajot. If we go with item 2 here with the big compatible R2D2 bins or whatever you call them. I was gonna ask if we needed a separate one on site also for recycling. But the way you explained it, the compactor, we just attach the bin to the compactor, compact and just switch bins. Did I understand that right?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, the compactor stays in place and the 40-yard bin just hooks onto it and it compacts the waste in, and then you just switch out the bins.
Okay,
Just for clarification, I think Counselor's question was, do you need one compactor for each? My assumption is yes, you need one for the
Correct.
garbage and one for the recycling on both sites. So
Correct,
that
yes.
gives you 4 compactors.
okay, thank you. Then we would need 2 compactors per site. So 2 sites for compactors. Also with if we stick to item 1 or item 2, you have here that we're subject to waste composition studies. Is this a study that we do ourselves? Do we have to hire an engineer? Pay extra money I believe you said quarterly, I believe you said a while ago.
For you, Madam Chair. The composition study is something that we would do in-house. There is a template that CMO does provide to the municipality, and they just have like parameters of how long that you collect the data for, and is to determine how much funding they're going to provide the municipality. So if we have ICIs, commercial establishments that are coming in and they're dropping their waste there, as well with recycling, we need to note that. And then based on that, we need to support that they're not coming in, that we're only receiving recycling from eligible sources to receive the full funding amount.
Okay, then it wouldn't cost us anything extra for an engineer to do this. It's in-house. It would cost us staff time though.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
So I don't agree with keeping bids in Albin and Wallville if we can't keep them in Shaw Road and Minettville. I don't think it's fair to our constituents. I think we gotta have the same kind of program all the way through. That's my opinion on that. I think there's as many side roads everywhere. So I think for that. In the option 3, which is going to curbside, are we able to offer our businesses recycling at the landfill? Because currently, we know that curbside works good for everybody else. And we know that they can recycle their cardboard, but they can't recycle their plastics and that at the landfill currently. So would that be an option to have a recycling area for the businesses? Because we have a lot of campgrounds that would recycle, which right now they can't really recycle because where do they put it? It goes into the landfill, right?
Through you, Madam Chair. So right now, we do accept all recycling from businesses at the landfill site. And all recycling comes to the landfill site and the 40-yard bins we have there. We always have, it's mixed and
Oh.
it goes to the process.
I always
facility.
thought it was just cardboard. I only ever throw my cardboard in there. I've never thrown recycling in there. To
It's-
tell you the truth, every time I go to the landfill, it's only cardboard that goes in there because I didn't realize it was both.
Yeah, no,
So-
it said, it's labeled recycling. It's the same as any other bin we have. It's just when we switch over to the program, we will have to have a separate bin for commercial establishments because it's not covered under the funding. So that will be brought up later on. So when commercial starts bringing recycling, they're not covered under the same parameters for the refunds. So it'll just be a separate bin public in one, and then businesses in another one.
Just a quick question. What's the contamination rate for those in the recycling bins, the 40-yard ones?
Through you, Madam Chair. So as soon as we got rid of we had to lower the amount of bins at all the sites to get us past. We've went to 0% because the gate attendants watch they're right there to watch the 40 yards. So even the businesses coming in, if it comes in bags, they have to pull it out of the bags and they go in there and that's it. So we're at 0% across the board right now.
Well, it's just, I haven't had a chance to read all your answers, which is then putting you in an unfair position and me in an unfair position and the rest of us in an unfair. My suggestion is that we bring this back on the table at the next meeting. So that way we'll have 2 weeks to read the answers, which then will probably cut down the number of questions and the amount of time people have. And then we can take it from there. That's just a suggestion for everybody. So it's up to you.
Through you, Madam Chair, I was going to suggest the same thing. But I just want to reassure everybody that these are council discussions at this time. You've asked for additional information on certain items, and you may have some more at the next meeting. But I just want to reassure the general public that there will be a period once council has requested all their information of having public consultations period to ensure that the constituents have their voice as well. So what form that's going to take place, not completely sure, but there will be an opportunity to voice your comments and concerns for or against the various options to municipal council through Zoom or in person.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
I just wanted to clarify that for.
Oh, I remembered the question I had. Some campgrounds pay individual taxes on the additions of their trailers. Would those people qualify for pickup even though they're on a campground because they do pay a separate tax bill?
Do you want to handle this?
Through you, Madam Chair. The impact assessment just goes back to the business owner. So they're not paying for any extra service. They are just paying the property, like the property owner is the one that gets the bigger bill.
So the property owner is the one that gets taxed for the additions of the trailers. Okay. So, but they have a right to vote. But they don't have a right to have garbage. The campground.
Did you?
What? I mean, it's like a gray zone there. They pay taxes, but it's the property owner. It's a business. They get to vote.
So through you, Madam Chair, I'll try to explain. So campgrounds, there's two campgrounds in our municipality, 2 or 3 that impact through a certain period of time. They started assessing the sites individually for any improvements. Those improvements are shown separately as sites, and the campground owner gets kind of a report on the separate assessments per sites. It's still the campground owner that pays those taxes. Some have chosen to download those costs to those renters, but some have not. So it depends on the campground. Either they've charged them a flat fee or whatever. That's not our concern on how they decide to recoup those costs. The voting and the taxes are very separate. So enumeration is Ontario elections that have decided to allow campgrounds to vote. So that is very separate from taxation. So we have 3 campgrounds. So because I'm the election official, so there's 3 campgrounds in our municipality. Within how many campgrounds do we have? I'll just throw number 15. So we have 3 campgrounds that are enumerated. So that means that MPAC have gone through the process of assigning a site and enumerating them. So enumerating them I'm not going to be able to explain that because I don't have the words. But they have decided to enumerate, so get the stats of who are the tenants. So it's not fair across the board, and that is across Ontario. So there are only 3 campgrounds that are enumerated that we have a voting list for them. Not all of them. So enumeration is very separate from taxation. So because they have their,
Same people that are getting taxed that are. It's still those same people that are getting taxed that are allowed
so
to
it's
vote.
the campground that is getting taxed,
Yeah,
not the specific owner. There's no tax bill going to the tenant of site 1.
But-
If that's what you're
but
asking.
it's still those people through impact that are allowed to vote. Like it's the same campground and the same people.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's not just because some of the tenants within a campground have the right to vote. It has nothing to do
Do
with
with,
taxation.
with the tax.
It's very
They're-
separate.
They're
It's
two separate
very
issues.
separate
They're
issues.
two separate issues.
It's not fair across the board or across Ontario or across the campgrounds that are within our municipality.
Okay. So I think if everybody's in favor, I think thank you, Kevin and Mark and Michelle and everybody who answered our questions. I think if everybody's in favor, do we need a mover and a seconder to bring this forward to the next meeting? No. Are you guys all in favor of adding this to the next agenda? Kind
It'll
of.
give us more time to reflect and to read the answers that was supplied to us by staff. And I didn't realize Councillor Willie had submitted a list of questions, so I wouldn't mind reading his stuff too. So
Okay, seems, yeah, go ahead.
If I may, Madam Chair, if I may ask a question. So at the next council meeting, we had scheduled to bring the comprehensive report for short-term rentals. Is this something that council is open on delaying? Mhm. Or is council ready to have the discussion of short-term rentals and waste management at the same meeting?
well,
It's really,
I-
it's up to the mayor to decide.
So the
but-
waste management, the short-term rental, Andrea's coming back with a draft, or you're coming back with a draft?
So staff is going to go through all the comments and feedback that
Right.
we've received. We're going to come together to consider them and consider if there's any of those comments that would merit any changes or amendments to our draft bylaw at this
Okay.
point. So whenever that staff is going to report, we're going to be reporting on a brief of all the comments, kind of summarizing the comments. Council has received all the comments that staff have received.
Mhm.
But we're going to report on them in a brief manner, let's say, and report on any amendments that we feel merit based on the comments that we've received.
Sounds good to me. I think we can do both. I mean, we're still in discussions with fact finding, I would say, for the 3 options. So that's just discussion, is not decision making. So I think we can do both. I just don't want to delay the short-term rental bylaw anymore. We can do both, eh? Yeah, fair enough.
Okay. Well, I think we're good. 7 correspondence, none. I need a mover and a seconder for the consent agenda. Counselor Dave and Counselor Roger.
Duly moved and seconded, be resolved that council approves the items of the consent agenda under section 8.1.
All in favor? Good. There is no items from the separate. Any notices of motion? There is none. Announcement and inquiries. Counselor Roger?
This one, oh, through you, Madam Chair, this one is for Jason. Will the ACC be open? Or when will it be open?
I can't answer the definite when it will be open. I can answer that we are on schedule right now to where we want to be. There is some other delays that have set us back. I can get back to you on an exact date.
Yeah, because I've had people approach me saying, when would it be open? I would like to basically have it for, have a Christmas party or whatever there.
Through you, Madam Chair. Just to chime in here, our initial assessment of December for an official opening and volunteer ceremonies is what we've been striving for right from the beginning. From my discussions with Jason today, we seem to be still on track for that opening. But if there's any changes, we'll certainly bring council up to speed. That being said, things have been on schedule since the contract was awarded back in March, if I'm not mistaken. So things have been progressing, just like any other construction project. We find ourselves in challenges in certain areas, but Jason's on top of things with the contractor and the architect and the project manager.
Okay. I have another question, and there's nobody here from roads or public. Question is, for example, Delamere and Trout Lake Road. Will that be worked again this year before the weather changes?
I'm not going to give you a false answer through you, Madam Chair. We'll certainly check with Martin in Public Works and get the schedule where they at. I know the graders have been out the last several weeks working on the roads on a consistent basis. So the whole time at this time of year is to get your roads ready for the winter. So
Okay.
I know they've been out where they're at typically in their schedule. I don't have that information with me, but I'll certainly have somebody get back to you, Councillor Roger.
Yeah, because I went through these roads last Friday, and they are very rough. Some areas. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bob.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Very, very little. Just for everybody's information, we are 11 weeks, 5 days away from Christmas. Have a great evening.
Through you, Madam Chair. Just a few things to add. Living on the waterfront, it was always nice for me to receive this information. I'm fortunate enough that somebody provides me with information with respects to lake drawdown from Lake Nipissing. I guess because we've had relatively moisture-free weather for the last 2 weeks, the lake was positioning itself, preparing for the drawdown. I guess the last report indicates that with the additional rain coming, that the lake will be opening the dams and the river will be coming up as a result. So it's just good to know if you have anything that needs to be secured to tie it up, remove it, get it ready for the water to come up. It does look like they're getting ready for winter position on the lake, and it's good to know. So, and then just next week, October 11th, the Economic Committee will be meeting again. That's all I have.
Mayor Peugeot.
On Friday, the consultants from the affordable seniors housing presented to the Alban seniors, and that went very well. They filled out the surveys. There was some good discussion, and we'll see where that project goes.
Councillor Dean.
I really don't have anything, but Willie's absolutely right. Thanksgiving is when they start to draw the lake down. That's just traditional, and they will start then. They have a long way to go to get it down about 6-7 feet. So it takes until March to do it, and they start as early as they can. And Thanksgiving is when everybody in the area said, well, if you just keep it steady till then, we'll be happy. So that's what they do. I won't say anymore.
Councillor Dave.
I don't have anything to.
I don't have much this week either, just maybe happy Thanksgiving to everybody. That is on the weekend. So even though it's gonna rain, hopefully you can enjoy some turkey and some ham. And that's about it from me. I don't know if any of the staff have anything to say. No, we're good. Okay, so I need a mover and a seconder to adjourn. No, a confirmation bylaw. Counselor Dave, Counselor Will. I always forget that one.
Duly moved and seconded, be resolved that bylaw 2023-50 being a bylaw to confirm the proceeding of council of French River at a meeting held on October 4th, be read first, second, and third time and finally passed.
All in favor? And now we will need a mover and a seconder to adjourn. Counselor Bob and Counselor Dean.